Okay, I think we are streaming. There's a 70% chance we're streaming. And if not, this particular part, I'm not going to cover too much that wasn't already in the videos. So there's definitely documentation out there for this. So I'm creating a new Gato project. We're going over Lab 4 and we're doing a review, sort of getting oriented in 3D. I'm going to choose the Mobile Plus or the Forward Plus renderer because I want to use some nice cutting edge graphics and stuff. So I'll hit create and edit and we'll create a new project. When we're working in 3D, what do I need to do? What's like the bedrock of a 3D scene? What do I need to have in order to have a functional 3D scene? Well, what do I need to have any scene?
3D node.
Yeah, we need some sort of node, right? And a 3D node is great, right? The 3D nodes are red, right? The 2D nodes are blue. And again, the 3D nodes are just like the 2D nodes, except they have a third dimension, right? So like here is 2D, and we have our red x-axis and our green y-axis. In 3D, we have a red x-axis, a green y-axis, and a blue z-axis. And so technically, like, this is kind of the way it's like the default orientation. So like going in this direction moves the x number up, right? You can see it increasing over here. Going this way moves the x number down. Unlike in 2D, right, the y is again up. It's not reversed anymore. It's kind of back to our normal understanding. So the higher you go up this way, the bigger the y number gets. And then conversely, the smaller the y number gets. And then, of course, the extra special number is z, which is this the z-axis, forwards and backwards, right? You'll notice that I'm using this particular gizmo. If you don't have this gizmo, right, there's all these different little, these particular gizmos are for like manipulating 3D. And this one over here is my personal favorite because it has all of them. So it has the like, this moves us just along one axis. And this, it's kind of hard to tell, but this moves us along this plane, right? So you can see I'm moving along the, I can move up and down and left and right, but I cannot move forwards and backwards on the z-axis, right? So if I pull down, I'm actually going down. And if I grab this and pull up, and I'm going up, right? So these are handy if you're trying to move something along in a specific way. Any questions about how to use this gizmo? It's pretty straightforward. Yeah. So this is good, right? This is a nice start for a 3D scene, but again, this isn't actually gonna do anything as a scene. If I were to play this scene and select this current, and I'll just call this main, we would get nothing, right? Why do we have nothing? What's missing?
Camera.
Camera, right? Why do we need a camera?
Because it is a 3D thing and will not have the original canvas.
Yeah, that's totally right. In our 2D scenes, right, we have this like area of the window sort of outlined for us, and it's easy enough to just kind of start a 2D scene and have the window, which is 2D, so it just kind of has a default thing. But because this is 3D, right, this is a space, and the computer doesn't know what to do with this. There's no way to like, because again, when we run our scene, ultimately, unless you're running it on like a VR headset, this window is two-dimensional, right? I can't grab it and pull it or anything. So we have to have a camera because we have to flatten down the 3D space into a 2D picture. So I do need to add a camera, right? So I'll go ahead and add a camera 3D. And you'll see here, right, there's also an XR camera. So if you want to do VR in Gato is also is really good at doing VR. And everything you do in 3D, you just have to add a couple extra XR nodes, and then you can do VR. So just you can put that in the back of your brain if you're ever interested in doing VR. But I'm just going to use a regular camera 3D, and you will see that here it is, right? It has this little purple thing, which shows you the angle that the camera is viewing it from. If I click perspective, it looks like that, right? And now if I run the scene, it still looks like, but why? Why is that? We have a camera, but what else is missing? Lights, right? Because again, we're simulating a real space. Just like in the real world, we need light, right? Light comes from a place, bounces off an object, and goes into your eyeballs, or goes into a movie camera, or a camera, right? And we have to do the same thing, so we need to add a light source. We have these default ones up here. Turn them on and off. I'll add the sun. Any questions about like these specific previews? Any questions about any of this so far? Right? I know I'm just kind of doing a review of what's in the video. So do you have any questions about what was in the video or what we're sort of covering right now? This azimuth is sort of like the rotational value of the sun. So what you can do is sort of like change where the sun is in the sky by changing the azimuth. And this is all on what's called a skybox, a shader, a sky shader, basically. And I'll show you some other ways to use skyboxes in a little bit. But for now, I'll just add this scene. And you don't need to add the environment, but the environment is nice to add to give your scene a little bit of environment, right? To give it like a background, kind of. So now we have this world environment and this directional light. The directional light is like the sun, and so again, because the sun is infinitely far away, its position doesn't matter, only its rotation matters. And now when we run the scene, we can actually see it, right? And it looks like this preview environment. Okay, the other component of the lab was to create like a simple level. What do I need for a simple level? What's like a good way to make up an object, a thing?
Remember it was a box.
Yeah, we want a box, right? Yeah, it doesn't have to be a box, but there's all these things that are called geometries. And is it clear the like distinction between geometries, materials, and textures? Yeah, a geometry or a mesh is like the shape of a thing, right? So you can have anything in any shape. Then a material is kind of like its skin, right? It's like the layer on top of it that is like its color and its bumpiness and its patterns and the way it reflects light. And then the textures are specific parts of that material which then convey specific information, right? So like in 2D, we have like a sprite that has a texture, but in 3D, we have a mesh that takes a material which can then take a texture. So it's a little bit more complicated, but it allows you to do more stuff. So you can add like just a regular old mesh. These are gonna be things sort of like sprites which don't have collision shapes, right? You can't hit them. So if I were to add a mesh, I would also need to add a collision shape. I'm gonna do a shortcut and use a CSG shape, which is good for prototyping. We have all these CSG shapes here, and these have collision shapes kind of baked into them, so it's very easy to use them. So I'm just gonna hit the box and hit create. I'm gonna make it bigger by grabbing these little handles. And you'll see, I'll show you what I mean specifically by material, right? Here's the material property. I can create a new standard material for it, and as soon as I do that, you'll see that its color changes. And just by default, you have a bunch of fun little things you can play with. So for instance, if you want to change the color of it, you can go to color and then change the color, right? You can also, I don't think I did this in the video, you can make things transparent pretty easily just by clicking on the transparency and enabling it, and then you can hit, you can make it sort of somewhat transparent. And so now, let's see. Oh, you can't see it because then I think you have to go back to the albedo, yeah, and change the alpha value. But now it's kind of like a somewhat transparent thing, which is kind of cool, right? Maybe you want like a hologram or something. Or maybe I want this to look like glass, right? So in order to make this look like glass, I can go to here and I can maybe go to the metallic section and make it more metallic, perhaps? I like to sort of just play around with these things until it looks the way I want it to. You also see that it's sort of annoying because here, when you have it selected, it's blue because you've selected it. But if you look up here, this is a preview of what the material actually looks like. I'll go down to roughness and turn down the roughness. Yeah, that makes it nice and shiny because it's no longer rough, right? It's like reflecting light. And I will also give it a something called a clear coat. This is kind of like a clear coat of kind of clear paint on top of it. And I'll turn down that roughness. And there's like all of these different parameters which you can play with. If you turn on the emission, that's kind of turns it into a light source. It makes light come from it, which is kind of cool. So for instance, if I turned on the emission and made it like white or pink or something, and then if I actually turn off the sun, let's see what happens if I turn off the sun. I'll just delete the sun. let's run this scene. Oh, I gotta move the camera outside of the box. That would be helpful. Again, in order to, oh yeah, and I got hung up on this in the video. So you can split the viewport into 2 viewports by clicking, oh my God. No, don't forget again. Yeah, click on view, then you can do 2 viewports, then you can click on the camera, do perspective to look at the image from the camera, and now when I drag the camera, we'll see there it is, right? Here's the view from the camera, pull it over here, and I'll just kind of put it on an angle, and then I will turn off the sun. I'm not sure if this is gonna look the way I want it to, but I think this should have some light. It's kind of interesting. Maybe if I also turn off the world. It looks kind of bad. The emission stuff you have to play with for a bit in order to get right. All of these things, it's really kind of a matter of like there's a lot of fiddling involved. Yeah, right, so you can give objects materials pretty easily, right? In order to make a level, right, you just make kind of like a bigger, the easiest way to do this, if you want to make a level in like Cinema 4D or Blender, go for it. But if you just want to prototype something, you can just take these CSG shapes and just use them as like sort of like templates, right? What you can also do with CSG shapes, if you really want to get fancy, is you can, there's this node called a CSG combiner, and this lets you like group multiple CSG shapes together, and you can like combine them in these wacky ways. So for instance, I'm going to take this combiner and put the box as a child of it. Then I'm going to give another node called a cylinder, and I'll put the cylinder here, and I'll make the cylinder nice and big, and I'll put it in the middle. And then I can do this thing where I click on this, and instead of union, I can do subtraction, I think, or intersection. I always get this part wrong. Come on. Maybe it has to be a child. Yeah, okay, so I guess what you do is you take your first CSG shape, then you take your combiner and make it a child of that, and then anything that's a child of that will sort of get combined. So in this way, you can very quickly kind of make like a hole in the ground, right? But you could do something like this to make like a house, for instance, right? I'll make a very dumb little house by just kind of adding a box. We'll make a box. We'll make it big. Whoop, whoop, whoop. I'll make a window by adding a cylinder. Drag it, shrink it, move it over here. I'll rotate it 90 degrees. That's good enough. Put it right there, shrink it further, put it over here. You get the idea. And then I'll just add a CSG combiner, and I'll make the cylinder a child of the combiner. And so if you do union, it kind of like makes them one shape, basically. It sort of like combines them together into one mesh. You can see the mesh kind of, the lines of the mesh sort of wrap around. So this is actually combining it together into one object. But if you do intersection, this is just the overlapping area of the mesh. And then if you do subtraction, it'll like punch a hole in it, right? So this is a weird house. I don't know, I wouldn't want to live in it. But you guys are like slightly more artful than I am, so I'm sure I'm sure some of you could actually make a pretty robust, interesting level with just these tools, right? And again, what's really nice about CSG shapes is in order to add collisions to them, all you really need to do, what I'll even do is I'll just make one whole CSG combiner, I think. Let's see if this works. I'll put this on the top. I'll put all of these guys as children of it. I'll call this one level, and then I'll just click use collision, and then everything suddenly has a collision shape, which is really, really easy, right? It's a very easy way to navigate. The lab also wanted a character, right? A character body 3D, which again is just as straightforward as a character body 2D. You just do character body 3D. You give it a collision shape, 3D. For humanoids, it's pretty good to use the capsule shape. You can use any shape you want, but typically with characters, we like to use capsules because they're kind of roughly human-sized, right? And again, in 3D, if you're ever lost, you can always just select the node you want, hover over the thing, and press F, and that'll center it for you, which is kind of handy. I'm going to get rid of this viewport. This is good. We have a collision shape, but you can't really see it. We don't really have a visual representation, so I'm going to add a mesh instance. And the mesh instance is good for, you know, if you want geometry that doesn't have a collision shape attached to it. And so now we have a character, right? I'm going to right-click, attach a script, character body, 3D, and it has a template, which is great. So I'll just create the template. This is the built-in template. And now when I run the scene, we should have a little character who walks around. It's pretty cute. And actually, you know, there's plenty of old school games that kind of have a fixed camera perspective like this. So you could totally do this, right? Or if you wanted to make like a 3D platformer or something, you could very easily just take a camera and maybe stick it like here on the character, but then maybe, let's see, where did the camera go? That's a bad place for it. You could put it like maybe here or something. It's kind of like a fun 3D platformer vibe. Has anybody played like a 3D platformer? Like the new Mario games, the new Mario not Mario Party, but a bunch of the new Mario I guess platformer games are 3D, but they are full-on platformers. And they're kind of done in this way, right? They just take, I'll delete this other old camera. They just have a camera that follows the player, and it's like a little bit more complicated than this, but you could just remove the ability to go forwards and backwards, and then you basically have like an interesting kind of platformer. So this is all you need to do for Lab 4, okay? So just create a simple level with a character body and a camera, and then put this in GitHub and submit it. Any questions on this particularly? Or any questions on like intro 3D stuff? Yeah. I'll show you a little bit more about materials, right? Because these don't look very good. Well, I guess here's a question. What are some ways, if I wanted to like make this look better, right? Make this look more like a more interesting environment. What are some things I could do to make this more dynamic? Texture? Yeah, texture is one of them. We could give textures to objects and give them like patterns. I can show you how to do that. What are some other like techniques we could do to like enhance the vibe of this, right? This currently looks pretty simple, but like what could we do to like
Get some assets from internet.
Yeah, we could just get some assets from the internet. That's true. We could bring in some models and stuff, right? I will do that quickly, and I'll do that in textures and a little bit of light stuff, and then we'll take the break. Does anybody have like a place they like to get assets from the internet from? There's lots of places. Does anyone have a favorite like asset library?
CG Trader, TurboSquid?
Yeah, CG Trader and TurboSquid are pretty good. Do you have a favorite file format? OBJ. OBJ is pretty good. The trick with OBJ is sometimes the textures aren't attached to the model, so you have to do that kind of manually. So, which is good if you want to have like control and you want to maybe add your own textures to something, which you can totally do. But yeah, let's see. Let's grab like the white now. $1,400. So this is why these free buttons are great. You just click free, and wow, that's a whole modern house. That's a lot of pretty stuff. I don't know who's feeling what. What should we get? Somebody shout out an asset that they want to see. Is anybody resonating with any of this? An ornamental blender monkey. I think I'm good on that. Creepy playground stuff. What about this old building? Let's get an old building. See how this looks. So you just find your models, right? And again, it's good to confirm your licenses. So that's why these libraries are great, because you can just grab them. I'll just show you the other ones real quick too. Turbo Squid is also really good. Turbo Squid, right? Bing, bang, boom. It's the same type of deal, right? Itch also has 3D models. They don't have as many 3D models. They have a lot more 2D pixel art assets. But what you can do is you can just go to here and you can search. You do 3D as a tag, and then this will give you some good 3D assets which you can grab. There's also other things to go back to textures. You want to grab some nice materials sometimes too, and those you can find at a place. There's also a bunch of million places for these, but I like a place called Polyhaven, I think. So you can grab, they have models, textures, and HDRIs, and it's probably good to show you HDRIs too. So we'll grab some textures and some HDRIs. So these materials are for coding things, right? They're for giving things like depth and dimension and stuff. So I'll grab, I don't know, let's get this. Let's get some bricks, maybe. And for these, you can just click on the resolution you want. The higher the resolution, the better they'll look. But the flip side is that they will, they'll be, they're like chunkier, so that might be more to download, and sort of if you're running it on certain computers, it might be harder to process and stuff. So I'll just get 2K. For now. I'll also show you one other actually really important thing. Oh shit. Megascans. The Quixel Megascan library. They're owned by Unreal Engine. These are amazing like scans of real world environments. And if you go to Quixel right now and you go to, you can click this Claim Now button. This is only good until the end of the year, so I really recommend doing this if you have any interest in using like high quality 3D assets. All you have to do is click Claim Now, sign into your account, and then you get access to the entire Quixel Megascan library of like super high quality scans of like all sorts of stuff. Like they have, let's see. They've got like really nice. I don't know if these are. This might be the. So, Epic also has this sort of store called Fab. So there's a bunch of different things in the Fab store, and I can't tell which is Quixel Megascans and which isn't. But suffice it to say, there's like hundreds of super high quality scans, like photogrammetry scans of real world objects, which you can get for free. So I really recommend everybody go to fab.com, sign up, and get Claim Now, and you can get free lifetime access to these assets. And it's only good until the end of this year. Okay, sorry, I'm all over the place. We're getting these assets. We've got our brick wall. That's great. We were gonna get this old building, free download. We have to wait 18 whole seconds so they can show us this ad. That's so cool. In the meantime, I'll go to the HDRIs and I will get a skybox. Okay, so this is a type of thing that you can use instead of the background like sky shader. You can use what's called an HDRI or a skybox to give your your background a little bit more pizzazz. So I will go ahead and download the HDR version and hit download. I think that'll work. I'll also get the EXR just in case, because I'm not entirely sure. I'm gonna go back to this tab, see if our building is ready. It is. I'm gonna download it. Oh no. I don't wanna make an account. Okay, I'm not gonna make an account, but all you would have to do is make an account and then you hit download. I know that I don't need an account for itch, so I'm just gonna go on itch and grab something, but it's the same sort of process. Problem with itch is they all kind of look a little bit more retro and less sort of high quality, but this metro is kind of cool. So let's get this. So I'm gonna hit download now. I'll say no thanks and download. Okay. And I don't know if I have an RAR expander. Oh my God. Nope. Okay. Search App Store. Oh God. Okay. No, go away, go away, go away. Not now. Not now. And RAR, does everybody know what RAR is? It's just like a zip file. You just need a specific app in order to expand it. Because I don't control this computer, I can't install an app to expand it, so I'm gonna have to find a different asset. So I will try this medieval interior pack. See if this works. Take me to download. Okay, zip. We love zips. We love FBX. Download the FBX. Okay. Now, right here are my downloads. I am going to just expand anything that's zipped. You want to expand it, right? So we have sort by date added. We have the tavern pack. We have this brick wall thing. And then now I can take this, I'll take this, I'll take this and this. And I will grab Gato. And I will drag Gato a little bit so I can drag this over here. And you just drag and drop. And it'll take a minute. Oh, this is probably, oops. Ah, ah! Okay, wait. There's a bunch of different file formats that you can use to bring in 3D objects. I really should have looked in this folder first before bringing all of them in. But that's okay. File formats that are particularly easy to use within Gato are FBX or GLB. Okay, FBX is like a proprietary file format. I believe that's what. Who does Cinema 4D? Does anybody do Cinema 4D? Some of you know Cinema 4D a little bit, right? Yeah, you export into FBX from that, right? Yeah, so that's what you can export your projects from Cinema 4D into FBX files. I believe in Cinema 4D you can also export to GLB, which is like an open source equivalent of FBX. So basically, when you're looking for models, OBJ is pretty good, but again, because you don't have the textures, it can be a little bit tricky to work with. The ones that are easiest to work with in Gato specifically are FBX or GLB files. Those are particularly well suited to importing into Gato because you just have to drag and drop. It took a minute because this was like a big asset pack. But now I think we just have this stuff and we can really just kind of, boop. No, it doesn't have the textures. Oh, yeah. When you're working with file formats, this is kind of the name of the game. There's like a lot of like, oh God, why am I missing the colors? That's annoying. Everybody packages things differently. So in order to really get these working, what you would probably want to do is, let's just do this candelabra. You can right click on the candelabra to, when you import them, it's not gonna let you like edit the file itself. Some of you might have experienced that. So you might need to, what I like to do is right click and do make local. And this sort of takes the reference of the scene and turns it into a mesh, which you can directly edit. Then we can go to surface material overrides and create a new standard material. And then I think if we just go to the albedo, then we can probably drag and drop this texture onto the albedo. And that kind of looks good. Yeah, I think that's how they intend it. You might want to like turn down the color a little bit or something. The most important channels for making something look good with a material in 3D are the albedo, which is like the texture channel, right? So this just shows you like what, this kind of shows you what colors, basically what colors each of the pixels should be, right? Each of the vertices of the mesh should be. So that's what the albedo does. Another really helpful one is what's called the normal map. Normal maps kind of look like this. They're sort of weird and blue. And what they do, does anybody know what a normal map does? Yeah, what does a normal map do? To get really sort of oh yeah?
I don't know how to say.
It's complicated. Normal maps are actually really complicated, right? So when we have light, when we have an object and light bounces off of it, in the real world, right, we have all these different like corners and bumps and materials and stuff. So all the different particles of light bounce off of these objects in totally different ways. They go all sorts of different ways. And the way that that light bounces makes certain parts of the material look brighter or darker or rougher. But in computers, we have to tell all that to the objects. Right now, all of the light is just bouncing off of each of these pixels at a 90-degree angle. And what this normal map does is this is actually information for each one of the vertices or the points on this model. It says at that vertex, make the light bounce in this direction. And at this vertex, make the light bounce in slightly this direction. So it changes the way the virtual light bounces off the object, which basically makes it look a lot more realistic because it looks like the light is actually bouncing off of it in the way it's supposed to bounce. So in order to do that, what you do is you go to the material and you go to normal map, turn on your normal map, and then give this texture data to the normal map. And you'll see that even just right there, it's not the hugest. What did it do? Let's see. You can kind of see the difference, right? It's just slightly better, right? The way the light bounces is slightly more convincing, yeah? And you can do the same sort of thing with roughness and smoothness, right? So there's also like this metallic texture, right? So I'm going to go to metallic, and I'm going to just drag and drop this as a metallic texture. I think this particular model is saying that we should use both of these. So I'm going to drag this also to be the roughness texture. Yeah, and then it looks, yeah, now that actually looks really nice because now it's sort of nice and shiny at certain points, and it almost looks like it's made out of metal. So by adding all these different textures to your models, you can get your models to look a lot better than the way they just would be naturally. Does that make sense? Yeah? And so something like Polyhaven is cool because it just gives you all these different textures which you can use on anything. So for instance, we have this like weird little mesh I made over here. Nope, that's me. I guess I don't want to be made out of brick. We'll do like, oh, it's in the level. We'll do this box. Nope, let's do this cylinder. Yeah, okay, let's make this cylinder interesting. I'm gonna go to the material and create a new material. Then I'm gonna use this texture that I got off the internet, right? And so we have the brick wall set of textures. Ooh, that's not exactly the way I wanted it. Tricky. That's sort of annoying. I'm gonna grab a different file format, sorry. Let's see, what can we get? Okay, so instead of getting EXRs, I'm gonna download each of these files as either JPEGs or PNGs. So I'll do, oh dear, that's gonna take forever. You can command click, option click, how do you, what's the control? Oh God, oh God. Okay, whatever, I'm gonna do this the slow way. So I'm gonna open each of these in separate tabs. And you'll see that each of these are pretty interesting, right? These are all data. These are like data channels, basically, for the material. So this is like the color of each of the pixels. This is the height of each of the pixels. This is the normal map for each of the pixels. This is the roughness for each of the pixels. So it's this kind of clever technique of using images to store data, to store information about your object, right? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to do this in kind of a hacky way. We're just going to go to here and make them big. I'll delete this whole folder. I will add a new folder called brick. Then I will split it so I can just drag and drop to here. I'm just going to drag. Oh, is this going to take forever? Copy. Okay, this might be, let's see, we'll do this. Drag and paste. Come on. Copy, paste. No, okay. I don't want to waste your time right now, but we're so close. We'll do, okay, we've got a workflow. So just close, 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 drag and drop, close, drag and drop, close, drag and drop. Sometimes when you like make video games, you turn into a little bit of a robot. Does anybody feel that way when you're like just doing anything on the computer? You're like, why am I doing this one thing 6 times in a row? That's just me. Okay, so we've imported all our materials, right? And so then what you basically need to do is just drag and drop each of these into the different channels on your material itself. So we've got our material, we've got the albedo. I'm gonna take the, I think this one's the albedo. I'll bring this to the texture. And it's not mapped very well right now. That's okay, I'm not gonna worry about that too much for now. I'm gonna deal with that later. But we've got our texture, we've got metallic, skip a metallic, we'll go to roughness. Yeah, we have a roughness texture, drag and drop, rough, right, boop. We have a normal map texture, drag and drop it, boop. We have an ambient occlusion. Ambient occlusion is like little pockets of shadow, basically. So you just take the ambient occlusion texture, which is just AO for short. You just drag and drop that. We have a height texture, which is going to be like a little bit of a height displacement, which will give it a little bit of volume, which is kind of nice. That you can find, I believe, in the displacement. So height is often just called displacement when you're working with other things. And the displacement one, you kind of have to zhuzh. You have to tweak a little bit to get it looking good. That looks kind of good. And I could keep doing this for all these different things, but basically the workflow is import these assets and then sort of drag and drop them. And it looks weird on this mesh because I've just applied a flat mesh, a flat material onto like a weird cylinder mesh. But there's other tricks you can do to kind of make it fit better. So I can go to the UV mapping, and I believe if I turn on triplanar and change the scale. Oh, oops, that's the wrong button. Let's go back to UV. Maybe make the scale like 10. Nope, too big. 0.1. There you go. And that's kind of like a nice, like bricky floor, right? Could be better, could be worse, but that's a good start, right? Any questions about how you can make materials appear? Or import models? Is anybody interested in doing a 3D project for their final project? Nobody's gonna do 3D? Okay, we got one 3D, all right, well that's good. But everyone else is doing 2D? Is that true? Yeah? You're kind of gonna do 3D maybe? 2D. 2D, okay. Yeah, well then I should stop talking. Cool, well then yeah, we'll pause it there. 3D is fun, I'll say that, and if you make a 3D project, I'll be a little bit more lenient in the grading because it's harder. So play around with it if you want. Let's see, it's 4:11 now. I mean, I don't know. Just do a couple more things, quickie. So other quick ways to add spice, ambiance, flavor, variety to your life. Change the lights, right? So we just have this overhead like world light right now, which is kind of not that good. But you can add all sorts of lighting nodes. So we have lights. I'm going to add a spotlight node, which is a more specific light source, right? And I'm just going to like go to the world environment. Oh, and you know what? We were going to do a skybox too. But since nobody's doing 3D, let's see. Yeah, I'll show you a skybox. So in the world environment, we have our procedural sky material, which is what we're using currently. But if you get rid of that, right, suddenly we don't have any sky anymore, which is a vibe in and of itself. And right, maybe if I want to make this like spooky little brick area, I could like, spotlights are always spooky in my opinion. So you just take a spotlight, point it down. This is like the length of the spotlight, so you want to make sure it hits the area. And now when we run this scene, it should look kind of creepy, I think. It's a little creepy. Right, we have this sort of like lit up thing, right? So the spotlight is exactly what it sounds like. It's like an overhead lamp. We also have, I don't know, I don't want to go too in depth with this. If you're doing 3D stuff and you're playing around with fog, there's all sorts of cool things you can do. Specifically, if you're using the front end render, the forward plus renderer, you can use volumetric fog, which looks really nice, and has all these different parameters which you can play with. So you can like really make a very dense, foggy scene. Let's see, where'd our camera go for our person? Camera, let's move it closer and up. Right, so like this actually is kind of pretty dark fog. And what's nice about the volumetric fog is that the light sort of interacts with it in pretty cool ways. You can also, the final thing I'll show you is there's some very simple ways to do some what's called post-processing, right? So if you imagine this is like a camera, like a movie that's being filmed, a post-processing effect is almost like an Instagram lens, which you put on top of things in order to like change the way it looks, right? So there's lots of really complicated ways to do that that are kind of out of scope, but the simplest stuff you can do is if you go to the environment and then click on, let's see, there's a couple things you can do. You can add a, let's see, where is it? I think this one's probably easy. The camera attributes, you can add camera attributes. So has anybody done photography or like film stuff with actual old school cameras? You can change things like the exposure rate or the blur or the color correction. So for instance, if you turn up the exposure, it'll be like more intense and bright, right? So now kind of looks like a little bit more sort of sharper, right? You can also have what's called a DOF blur, which is basically just like, kind of like when things are blurry, right? So this is stuff that is far away from you, and this is how close, this is like the depth, right? When things are in focus versus out of focus. So that's kind of a cool thing you can do too. So now when we run it, it's like we have this sort of kind of blurry scene. I don't know what's going on over here. I think we have some weird children, which is what my parents said to me when I was younger. So this is like an easy way to have like a nice sort of kind of blur effect. And then, let's see. Yeah, we've got barrels for kids, which is not really what I want. I'm just gonna move them out. The final thing I'll do is go to the compositor and add a compositor. Oh no, this is going to be way complicated. Yeah, we're not going to do a compositor. Goodbye. And There was definitely an easier, oh, you can, in the world environment, here it is. In the world environment, there's this little tab called adjustments, which you can turn on. And this allows you to crank up the brightness or the contrast. So you can really sort of make the color crazy. You can turn down the saturation, so you can have like a black and white experience, right? And you can even have color correction, which I guess wants just a texture, which is kind of crazy. And maybe you can use like a 2D texture, a gradient texture, and you can change the colors of the gradient. See if this works. Yeah. So you can like make sort of weird kind of sort of sepia toned worlds. It's crazy stuff you can do with technology. Yeah, now we're like at a music festival or something. I don't know. So there's all sorts of things you can do, right? There's all sorts of tricks and techniques you can do to kind of enhance the visual appeal of your projects. And you can do all this stuff too in 2D as well. We're just kind of in a 3D module. Yeah, question.
How many weeks for our final?
Yeah, it's a good question. Next week. No, I'm kidding. No, the final projects are going to be due at the final, which I'm not quite 100% sure if that's been released yet. But I believe it's like the... what I have here is, yeah, right around the 16th of December, I think, is our last class. So a little under, about a month, right? And if you want to do, you know, what I would say is if you're interested in doing 3D, you don't have to do a whole lot of coding to create an interesting immersive experience in 3D. As you just saw, right, I've already created an environment, and there's a genre of game called a walking simulator, where you can just kind of make an interesting environment to walk around. You could have some music playing, some text, sound effects, or whatever, and that could be a really compelling narrative experience, right? And you might not even have to make a controller that's much more complicated than this. I have some demos of first-person controllers and third-person controllers, which you're welcome to use or modify, and I'll show you a little bit later. But I would say that, you know, with 3D, you really can mess around with it and get pretty far without having to do much more work. You know, 3D is not that much more complicated than 2D in some ways. So I wouldn't be too afraid of it. Any other questions about 3D stuff? Yeah? Cool. Let's do this. Let's take a 10-minute break now. We'll come back at 4:30, and then we'll start doing some brainstorming for our capstone projects, yeah? Cool. Stop streaming. Stop streaming.